Hello again. Here is part 3 of our dose response videos. Now we left off at the end of number 2 thinking about cancer risk from drinking water. But what about other routes of exposure? And what about children? So let's consider a study that was recently done in New Jersey. These scientists were looking at the health risks of being exposed to water in western New Jersey as children through 3 routes of exposure. The first route of exposure was body contact with recreational water. The second route of exposure was drinking contaminated groundwater. And the third was eating fish that was caught in the waters of western New Jersey. Obviously, we're only interested in water that is polluted in some way. The point is that they are looking at multiple routes of exposure. So let's say we have some children swimming in the Delaware River. We would have then a contaminant concentration, say arsenic, which comes from the rocks of the region, the ingestion rate, the exposure frequency, the exposure duration, the typical body weight for a child, and that child's expected lifespan. We then incorporate the slope factor, and we get the excess cancer risk, or ECR. Ingestion rate, that was determined or obtained from the US EPA Exposure Factor Handbook. There is one ingestion rate for drinking water and the other for eating fish. The exposure frequency in days. Now, how many days does a child fish or swim in the Delaware River, and how many days does a child drink water? So we have 350 days in one scenario and 20 days in another scenario. Exposure duration. Over how many years is this child going to be exposed to this water? And it's assumed to be 6 years. Now, if you live all your life in one town, it's going to be a bit longer than 6 years. If you only visited the town for a couple months one summer, it's going to be a lot less. But we're assuming that the average duration of exposure to the water in the Delaware River is going to be 6 years. The child's body weight is assumed to be 15 kilograms or 33 pounds, and the child is expected to have a lifespan of 70 years. Obviously, some will live to be older than that, and some will not live to be that long, but 70 years was taken as an average lifespan. Now, we're talking about one of the routes of exposure, one of the routes of exposure was fishing and swimming in the Delaware River. And how many days are we going to be swimming in the Delaware River? Maybe 20 days in the course of a summer. How long are we going to be exposed to the waters of the Delaware River? Maybe we're going to live in that area for 6 years, or we'll go swimming for 6 years. But wait a minute. What alarm bells are going off in your mind right now? And that should be the ingestion rate. The EPA Exposure Factor Handbook gives us an ingestion rate. One in the study was for drinking water, and the other was for eating fish. It says absolutely nothing about skin contact. So the authors of the study have assumed that we're talking about is the incidental ingestion of contaminated water from the Delaware River during swimming, boating, and fishing activities, which is a fancy academic way of saying that when you go swimming, occasionally you get a mouthful of water. Now, we can also have a hazard quotient, which is the risk of non-cancer effects. It's a little bit easier. We have the contaminant concentration, we have the ingestion rate divided by the body weight, all divided by the reference dose. So this brings us to the end of our virtual class. If you have any questions, now is the time to email me with them. We will resume our class with the in-class discussion of the 5 papers that you have been assigned for reading. So apologies for the poor sound quality and apologies for having to do this way, but that's how we're going to keep the class on schedule. Now, Schnitzel, come on. You gonna say hello to the students? No, my dog does not want to say hello to you. So good night, stay warm, and for God's sakes, drive carefully in this snow.